This is a program about shops and shopping, and about the prices we have to pay for the things we need, such as greengrocery, fruit and vegetables, meat or groceries. Big items, these, in a family budget. This is a program for housewives who spend a lot of time these days talking about the way prices have been going up. This is a program for mothers with growing children, for whom high prices are a big worry. Not everyone can eat well, and a rise in prices hits some more than others. This is a program for those who have to make do on a pension or national assistance. For them, rising prices means hardship. And this is a program for young people, too, like this couple who are setting up home for the first time. The problem of getting your money's worth. In short, this is a program for everybody. And here to introduce it are Harold Wilson and Edith Summerskill.
Most of the people you've seen on the film tonight have a cost of living problem. They're worried about high prices. And Harold Wilson and I have come here tonight to talk about them to you. To talk about why they are high under the present Tory government. And to find out just why they do affect your lives. And we want to tell you what we should do when we return as the Labour government of this country. Now, all of us shop. We know these prices go up every week. And to illustrate our point, we have a simple display tonight of the main foods and some other essentials which you all want in your homes, in order that we can show you just how prices have gone up. Now take butter. Well, there are many these days who cannot afford it. In 1951 it cost 2 and 6pence a pound. Under the Tories it's gone up to an average of 3 and 8pence. Margarine, that was 1 and 2 when Labour was in, now it is up to 1 and 8. It's the same with cooking fat. 1 and 4 a pound in 1952 and 1 and 10 now. All this cheddar cheese, 1 and 2 a pound in 1951 and 1 and 10pence today. And bacon, well, that's a real bodybuilder. This kind was 3 and a penny a pound under Labour and 3 and 10pence under the Tories. Then there's meat. Under Labour this cut was 2 and 6pence a pound. Now it's up to 5 shillings. And as every housewife knows, milk has gone up from 5pence halfpenny a pint in 1951 to 7pence a pint now. And tea, as we know, has rocketed up. Here is a well-known medium brand that's gone up from 3 and 8pence a pound to 7 and 4pence. That's exactly twice as much as it was under the Labour government. Now those are the differences which many of us have felt. Indeed, millions of us have felt. And I want you to remember those differences next week when you come to vote.
Well, there you have the prices then and now. And yet all Mr. Macmillan could find to say last week in his broadcast was to admit that prices had gone up a bit. Now, why have prices risen? Well, certainly it's very different from what we were promised in 1951. Do you remember all those Tory posters? Mend the hole in that purse. Conservatives will fight the rising cost of living and all the rest of them. Do you remember how the Tory leaders all pledged themselves not to cut the food subsidies? Sir Winston Churchill, Mr. Butler, Lord Woolton, and Dr. Charles Hill. All of them said they wouldn't cut the food subsidies. Yet what happened? In Mr. Butler's first budget in 1952, he slashed the food subsidies and prices in the shops soared high up. Indeed, a few months afterwards, when he was asked why it was that the cost of living had risen more in this country than in almost any other country in the world, he admitted then that it was the result of deliberate action taken in his budget. Deliberate action. It would have been bad enough if their betrayal of all these election pledges had been due just to Tory incompetence. But to admit that they had broken their pledges as a result of deliberate action was, of course, far worse. Now, of course, we must admit that this country is dependent on world prices. and that when world prices are shooting up, it's difficult to keep the cost of living steady here. Indeed, the achievement of the Labour government in a world of rising prices, with food prices rising to fantastic levels, was that we kept the cost of living in this country steadier than in almost any other country in the world. The achievement of the Tory government over the last 3.5 years has been that with world prices falling, and with food prices falling a great deal of the time, the cost of living has risen more in Britain than in almost any other country for which figures are available. Well, that's their record. Labour managed to keep prices relatively steady in the 6 years we were in office in a number of ways. There was bulk purchase, for example. We were able to buy the goods, the foodstuff, raw materials, and all the rest of it more cheaply than most other countries because of our government bulk buying. There was price control. At a time when things were scarce, we were able to protect the housewife against profiteering and high prices by a pretty strict price control. We kept a tight grip on the monopolies and the price ring. And there's one thing the Tories never tell you, and that is that the cost of the goods produced by the nationalized industries have risen a great deal less than the prices of the goods produced by private enterprise. Now, the Tories have scrapped all these defences of the housewife. They've scrapped bulk purchase. They've scrapped price control. The grip on the monopolies and the price rings has been relaxed. They've altered the system of food distribution in this country so that while the farmer is worse off, the housewife has to pay far more. Now, of course, I think honest Tories will admit that prices have gone up a great deal, especially prices of food. But of course their answer is this. They say, oh yes, but wages have gone up far more. Well, you know, you don't have the Tory government to thank for increased wages. It's your unions that have done that for you. I've never heard of a Tory yet who's been supporting any of these wage demands. And certainly most of them have had to be wrung after a pretty hard fight from unwilling Tory employers. Now, that has been the record, and that is the position that you are fighting in this election.
Now, may I talk to you as a doctor rather than a politician? You know, I came into the Labour Party as a result of examining the undernourished bodies of little children for many years. And I knew that I was prescribing medicine for children who really needed proper feeding. And when the Labour Party had power, and we had power, you know, only for 6 years, I was delighted to know that we were going to ensure that every child in the country had a fair share of the available food. And of these foods that I've been talking about tonight, every mother knows who's listening to me that a balanced diet means that a child should have plenty of the body-building foods. These more expensive foods, but not as expensive as the ones at the prices we've been describing tonight. The eggs, fish, milk, butter, cheese, and so on. And I'm shocked to learn that in 1954, the people of this country were eating less per head of fish, eggs, milk, vegetables, some of the most important foods, than they were when Labour was in power. Now, you see, as a doctor, to me, that is the red light. We mustn't go back. We must ensure that the children of the country have an adequate share of the food that is going. And we must adjust prices so that you can buy it. I'm sure the middle-aged and old people here will forgive me if I say that on your bodies, some of you, bear the marks of undernourishment which you suffered as children. Now let me say something to the old age pensioners. In that film that we've just seen, there were two wonderful old people, full of dignity, full of grace. We of the Labour Party, you know, regard old age pensioners as the soldiers of industry. And we believe that they deserve well of the country. We are shocked to discover that the Conservative Party has treated those on assistance so very shabbily. You remember at the end of last year, the Tory government said that they were going to increase pensions and increase assistance scales. Well, last month, the old age pensioners, those on assistance, discovered that the amount that they would receive would be only £0.50 a week. There are nearly 1 million of these people, and many sick people and many widows who are suffering in a similar way. That, of course, is all wrong. And when we are returned, we give you an undertaking that one of the first things that we shall see to is that the assistance scales are increased in order that you can buy these foods which are so necessary to you today.
Now let me say a word about how we're going to deal with the problem of prices itself. Well, there's one thing we're not going to do, and that is reintroduce rationing. The Tories are spreading a story all over the country that we're going to reintroduce the ration book. Let me say here and now, that is a deliberate Tory lie. They know perfectly well. Rationing had to be introduced in wartime. It was Tory ministers who did it, and they were right to do it. They know equally well that we had to keep it on after the war, when things were scarce. But we didn't keep it on for the sake of rationing. Whenever we could, we got rid of rationing. For example, in 1949 at the Board of Trade, I took a whole series of things off the ration. Household textiles